Hey, thanks so much for hitting play on Leanne on Demand today. I'd love to bring you a conversation I had on a podcast episode, but this isn't the podcast. This is the stuff we spoke about before officially starting the podcast episode. I honestly think sometimes the most interesting conversations happen before you're actually officially on the show. Even though we were already recording, it's like, I don't know. And if you've been a podcast guest or a podcast host, something shifts when you know, oh, now we're actually having the on the record chat as opposed to off the record. And in this one, I was chatting to Stephen Bleistein. I met Stephen through Alan Weiss's Growth Cycle community. So Steve and I were part of that group for 2 years together. He's a consultant in Japan. He is absolutely brilliant and he's very provocative in his approach and he doesn't hold back at all. And so you get that with Steve, whether you're hitting record or not. So this is him just being himself as he always is. And what I love about this conversation is, we talk about disruption and everyone talks about doing things differently and wanting to break the norm and all of that. And I really like Stephen's line here. He said, there is no soft, evolutionary, respectful disruption. And so here's a conversation around what it takes, like the courage, the fearlessness to do things that are different. And I think it's a nice way to kick things off because we think, if I do something bold, you actually have to accept that some of the time you're going to tick some people off as a result of doing that. There is no soft, evolutionary, respectful, kind disruption. You have to ruffle some feathers. And we talked through some examples of that too. So thanks so much, Stephen. This was from a few years ago. I only discovered it when I was trying to clean up my Zoom cloud recording files. And for some reason, I'd held on to this. And I think this is why for this moment. I'll share Stephen's details in the show notes if you're keen to reach out to him and connect with him. Enjoy this episode. Speak to you tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like you look at Tadashi Yana, fast retailing, he didn't give a damn what people think. He didn't care if he was going to upset people or piss people off. You think of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
You think that he cares if somebody's going to criticize him about what he does. People who are disruptive don't care. Steve Jobs was like that. He really did not care what other people thought about what it is that he thought or what he wanted to do. And if you're going to be disruptive, you got to be comfortable with that. That's one of the things that I tell people. And there's some people who are never going to be comfortable with that. They cannot disrupt. That's the case. There is no soft, evolutionary, respectful disruption that doesn't exist.
Yeah, my old boss, the guy that I was talking to about the word of mouth marketing, he just did not care. Some of the stunts that we did a lot of guerrilla marketing, like just really offensive marketing. He didn't care at all. He had lawsuits thrown at him every week. Just would actually just rip up the letters. And I think that was just, how do you do that?
Yeah, I've had situations where people are afraid of being sued when maybe they will be, but the suits are not going to win. They're frivolous. They might be rejected immediately. And you can't let that kind of thing stop you from doing what was right. I've seen the same thing where there have been employees of companies who have done really egregious things like threaten another employee's life, veiled threat. And a CEO client, this actually happened to them, wanted to fire the guy. And his HR director told him, no, we can't do that because he hasn't violated any regulation or law. We could be sued. Who the hell cares?
Oh my gosh, this is not the point.
Like, come on. He's not going to sue. You think that he's going to want it to become a matter of public record, suing you in an open court of law and having to make it a matter of public record what he actually said to the other employee? Do you think he wants it to be a matter of public record that he sued his former employer? Like, I got the name of the guy. I think it was an Austrian or a German who originally said, hey, I think the reason that we have all these people dying of infections in hospitals is because we're not washing our hands before surgery.
That's right. That's right.
And it wasn't until decades later that, people are like, hey, this is actually right.
Yes. And I thought he was crazy. Yeah.
No, I was reading over my son's shoulder, and he was reading this book. I can't remember the name, but I was reading over his shoulder, and there was this quote from Max Planck, the German scientist, and he said, "Science advances one funeral at a time." Like it almost takes the old guard to die off before the ideas can really germinate, because people are so afraid of saying something against them.
Yeah, I mean that's why I love what Alan does and what he tries to instill in all of us, just being fearless. That's so powerful.
Yeah, you have to be. Yeah. I mean, the thing about charismatic disruption was that it's an oxymoron.
That's it. Yes.
Which is what makes it a provocative title.
Yes.
And charismatic change it's somewhat provocative because most people view, change as something that's a little bit scary. It's kind of daunting.
Yeah. And that you've got to push onto people.
Right. That change is something that attracts as opposed to push away. I was really pushing for the same thing with disruption, something that attracts. I had this, in this workshop, this guy approached me, vice president, different division. And he was talking about the same thing, about very worried. How are we going to make sure that we attract people to our company if we're going to be this kind of in your face and this disruptive? And I said to him, look, let me ask you a question, because this is a guy, this is an ambitious guy who's pretty bold himself. And I said, let me ask you a question. Which company would be more attractive to you? The one whose leadership was talking about increasing growth in apparel business by 5% next year, or the one that said, we're going to kill Uniqlo? Which company do you want to work for? And he just knew right that this is the way to go. Smile on his face told me that my point was made.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of that concept of the BHAG, right? I know that's been sort of overdone, the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yeah, I think people overuse the term without actually realizing what it means. But it really does mean that you're doing things that people are not necessarily going to praise you for. Leanne, here's the thing. I don't even like the word facilitation. I don't do it. When people say, could you facilitate this? I say, no. Let me tell you how when I was working with the HR director said to me, so how do you plan to do this facilitation? I said, I don't.
Okay. I'm going to start doing that as just an instant response.
Yeah, I don't do facilitation. Whatever gave you that idea, because, facilitation is neutral.
It is.
But
it is,
I'm anything but neutral. I will challenge people. I will contribute my own ideas. I will challenge conventional wisdom and assumptions. I will play devil's advocate. Whether I believe in what I'm saying or not, I will push people really hard in these sessions that I run. And so I tell people, look, I don't do facilitation. I lead a provocative discussion. I think that's the thing that you do too. You don't really facilitate. You're teaching leaders how to do that.
Yeah.
The thing is, you want to tell them that you don't want to facilitate. If you're not neutral, you want to lead a provocative discussion with your staff. You're trying to go in a direction. You have ideas too, but you want their ideas as well. You want their innovation. That's not facilitation. That's something that's completely different. If you want to get provocative ideas out of people, you want to get innovation. You have to provoke people. It's the only way. Facilitators don't provoke. You want to be biased. You want to have a bias towards excellence.
Yeah.
And the thing is, not every voice is equal. That's the problem with engagement surveys in companies, is that people's feedback is all treated as equal. The reality is that the people who are mediocre, their feedback shouldn't matter at all. It's the people who are excellent, whose ideas and opinions should count the most. But that's a minority of people. And so basically engagement surveys they're catering to the mediocre.
That's a good article for you, by the way.
I've written that.
Oh yeah, I've written that. Great.
Do you want somebody who is going to be taking into account everybody's opinion and going to be really neutral and that kind of thing? Or do you want to have Seth Godin in the room? I think you got to get to the point where you're not afraid. That you're not worried about what other people think. Okay, so I'll go ahead and get started.
Sounds good.